The air was cold that Thanksgiving morning, but nothing felt colder than the silence that followed after my mother shut the door. For a second, I just stood there, frozen, my mind trying to make sense of what had just happened. My stepdaughter, Lila, was beside me, holding the pumpkin pie she'd baked all by herself. Her little hands were shaking, not from the weather but from confusion. She didn't understand why the door had been slammed in her face. I wanted to scream, to pound on the door, to demand an explanation, but something inside me stopped. It wasn't pride. It was disbelief. My own mother, the woman who raised me to be kind and forgiving, had just looked into the eyes of a 14-year-old girl and decided she didn't belong. Lila turned to me, her voice small. Did I do something wrong? I knelt down beside her. No, sweetheart, I said quietly. You did everything right. But the truth was, I didn't even believe my own words. Because in that moment, I felt like I had failed her, failed to protect her from the cruelty of people I had trusted all my life. We stood on the porch for another minute. Inside, I could hear faint laughter, forks clinking against plates, voices I knew too well. They were eating, celebrating, acting as if shutting the door on us was nothing. That sound would stay with me for a long time. Finally, I took Lila's hand and walked her back to the car. The pie sat untouched on her lap during the ride home. She kept looking out the window, quiet and pale, as the houses blurred by. Families sitting together, kids playing in yards, the smell of turkey and pies filling the air. I could tell she was trying not to cry, and that broke me even more. When we reached home, she carried the pie to the kitchen and set it gently on the counter. Maybe we can eat it later, she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. I went to my room, shut the door, and just sat there. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about Lila being turned away. It was about what that act meant, that my family had chosen to draw a line between blood and love. That night, as I watched Lila fall asleep on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, I made a promise to myself. I would never let her feel unwanted again. I didn't know what it would cost me, or how far I'd have to go, but one thing was certain. This Thanksgiving had changed everything. They thought closing that door would end the night quietly. They had no idea it was only the beginning of something much bigger. It started a few weeks before Thanksgiving when my mom called to invite us to dinner. Her voice sounded polite but distant, like she was reading from a script. She said, "We're having the usual family gathering. You, Ethan, and well, whoever you want to bring." I knew what she meant. That hesitation wasn't about anyone else. It was about Lila. Lila had been living with us full-time for almost 2 years. Her mom had moved to another state after a difficult divorce, and Ethan wanted his daughter close. From day one, I promised him I'd treat her as my own. And honestly, it didn't take long for her to steal my heart. She was quiet but thoughtful, always helping with chores and asking questions about family traditions. She wanted to belong, especially to mine. But my family made it hard. My mother, Caroline, had a habit of making little comments. "She's polite, but she's not really yours, right?" Or, "It must be awkward having someone else's child around all the time." I always tried to brush it off, telling myself she just needed time to adjust. My father stayed silent, as he always did, and my sister Hannah followed my mother's lead, keeping her distance. When I told my mom over the phone that Lila would be coming with us for Thanksgiving, she paused for a long moment before saying, "We'll see if there's room." I remember standing there in the kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Room?" I repeated. "It's our family dinner, Mom." She just sighed and said, "Of course, dear. I'll figure something out." Then she hung up quickly, as if the conversation had gone too far. Ethan was sitting at the table, reading something on his phone. He looked up when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" he asked. I didn't want to worry him, so I smiled and said, "Nothing. Mom's just being herself." But the truth was, something about her tone had stayed with me. A few days later, I tried calling her again to confirm the time. She said dinner would start at 4 and casually mentioned that Hannah's kids were bringing their friends, too. I asked if she needed us to bring anything, and she said, "No, it's fine. Just make sure you're not late. It gets crowded fast." I hung up feeling uneasy. Ethan noticed right away. "If you think they'll make Lila uncomfortable, we don't have to go," he said. But I told him it would be fine. I didn't want Lila to feel left out or different. She'd been looking forward to meeting my extended family again, hoping they'd finally see her as part of us. That night, as she helped me peel potatoes for dinner, she asked softly, "Do you think your mom likes me?" I froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "Of course she does," I lied. Because deep down, I already knew this Thanksgiving invitation wasn't what it seemed. It was a test, and I was about to learn just how cruel that test would become. The week before Thanksgiving, our house was filled with a quiet kind of excitement, mostly coming from Lila. She was counting down the days, crossing off each one on a little calendar she kept by her bed. Every evening, she'd ask me something new. what my mom's favorite color was, whether my dad liked jokes, and if it would be okay to bring something homemade. I told her she didn't have to, but she insisted. It's polite to bring a gift, she said shyly, so she decided to bake a pumpkin pie from scratch. She looked up a recipe on an old cookbook we had, determined to do every step herself. She mixed the dough carefully, humming under her breath, and when she accidentally spilled some flour on the floor, she laughed instead of getting upset. Watching her made my heart ache a little. She was trying so hard, too hard, to be accepted by people who had never really given her a chance. When the pie was done, she wrapped it neatly in foil and decorated it with a small note that said, "Happy Thanksgiving, love, Lila." She even tied it with a piece of ribbon she found in my craft drawer. It wasn't fancy, but it was thoughtful, and that was just who she was. Every day that week, she'd try on different outfits. "Do you think Grandma Caroline likes dresses or jeans better?" she'd ask. I'd tell her she should wear whatever makes her comfortable, but she wanted everything to be perfect. She even practiced how she would greet them. I overheard her one night standing in front of her mirror, smiling and saying softly, "Thank you for having me." It broke me a little, seeing her put so much heart into something that should have been simple, meeting family and being loved. I wished I could match her hope, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the feeling twisting in my stomach. Something told me that this Thanksgiving wouldn't go smoothly. My sister Hannah didn't help that feeling either. She had always been sharp with her words, but after I married Ethan, she became distant and cold. During one phone call, she joked, "You don't have to play mom to someone else's kid. You'll just end up getting hurt." I laughed it off at the time, but the words stayed with me. Hannah had never been cruel, but she had a way of making things sound like warnings. The night before Thanksgiving, I checked in with my mom again. She was polite but brief, and when I mentioned Lila's excitement, she just said, "That's nice." Something in her tone made me uneasy, like she already had a plan I wasn't part of. Lila, meanwhile, went to bed early, her outfit laid neatly on her chair, and the pie sitting in the fridge. Before sleeping, she peeked into our room and whispered, "I hope they like me this year." I smiled and told her they would. But as soon as she walked away, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't. Thanksgiving morning arrived with bright skies and a chill in the air. Ethan had been called in for an extra shift at the fire station, so it was just me and Lila making the trip to my parents' house. She was up early, dressed neatly in the outfit she'd picked out days ago, a soft yellow sweater and a simple skirt. Her hair was brushed perfectly, and she held the pumpkin pie carefully on her lap as we got in the car. The drive was about an hour, and Lila spent most of it talking nervously. She asked question after question. "Does your mom like hugs? Should I say grace or wait for someone else? Do your parents like when people talk at the table or just eat quietly?" I answered each one, smiling, trying to keep my tone light even though I was anxious inside. "Just be yourself," I told her. "They'll love you." She smiled shyly and looked out the window, humming softly to the Christmas music that had just started playing on the radio. At one point, she turned to me and said, "I want to make a good impression this time." I didn't know how to tell her that she didn't need to earn anyone's love. So I just said, "You already have." When we turned onto my parents' street, my stomach tightened. Every house was full of life. Cars parked outside, kids running around, smoke rising from chimneys. It was the kind of neighborhood Thanksgiving you see in movies. My parents' house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, decorated neatly with fall leaves and a big wreath on the door. Everything looked perfect from the outside. As we walked up the driveway, I could hear voices and laughter from inside. Hannah's kids were shouting, someone was telling a joke, and for a moment, Lila's face lit up. "They're having fun," she whispered, smiling nervously. I knocked on the door, holding my breath. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The laughter and talking suddenly faded, like someone had turned the volume down. I glanced at Lila, trying to stay calm. "Maybe they didn't hear us," she said softly. She balanced the pie carefully as I knocked again, pressing the doorbell for good measure. From the window, I saw a shadow move, someone peeking out, then pulling back quickly. The silence that followed was strange, heavy, the kind that makes your heart beat faster, because you know something isn't right. I could still hear muffled sounds from inside, a chair scraping, a whisper, a child giggling quickly before being hushed. Lila looked up at me, confused. "Should we knock one more time?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yeah," I said quietly. I gave the door one last firm knock, forcing a smile I didn't feel. The voices inside didn't return. The house stood still, warm light glowing through the windows, but no one came to greet us. Lila shifted from foot to foot, the pie trembling slightly in her hand. My uneasiness grew stronger by the second. Standing there on that porch, with laughter fading behind the walls, I realized something was terribly wrong, and that whatever was coming next, I wasn't prepared for it. I rang the bell one more time, this time holding it longer. I could hear footsteps coming toward the door, slow and hesitant. Then it opened halfway, just enough for my mom's face to appear in the small gap. For a second, she looked surprised, almost caught off guard. But when her eyes landed on Lila standing beside me, her expression changed. The smile she was forcing dropped completely. "Oh," she said flatly. "I didn't know she was coming." The way she said she, as if Lila wasn't even a person but an inconvenience, made my stomach twist. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Mom, of course she's coming. I told you days ago." Before my mom could answer, Hannah appeared behind her. She looked annoyed, holding a wine glass and whispering sharply, "Mom, don't start this again." But it was already too late. My mother took a deep breath, looked over her shoulder into the house, and then back at us. "We're full, honey," she said softly, like she was talking to a stranger, not her own daughter. "Maybe next time." I stared at her, not fully processing what she'd said. "Full," I repeated. "What do you mean full? It's Thanksgiving, not a restaurant." She sighed, glancing nervously toward Hannah. "It's just things are tight this year. We didn't plan for extra guests." I looked past her and saw through the crack, the dining table glowing under the chandelier, plates neatly set for at least 10 people. Hannah's kids were running around, laughing. There was plenty of room. Lila shifted beside me, her small voice trembling. "It's okay, Mrs. Caroline. We can come another time." That broke me. She still called her Mrs. Caroline, even after 2 years of trying so hard to be accepted. I turned back to my mother, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding. But instead, she gave me a weak smile, one that said, "Don't make a scene." Then, without another word, she slowly closed the door. The sound of it shutting echoed in my ears. I stood there, frozen, staring at the painted wood in front of me. Lila didn't move either. She just held the pie tighter, blinking quickly like she was fighting back tears. I heard the latch click, locking us out completely. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My mind went blank. The wind picked up, blowing Lila's hair into her face. I tucked it behind her ear and forced myself to say something, anything, to make the moment hurt less. "Let's go home, sweetheart," I whispered. She nodded silently. As we turned and walked down the porch steps, I could still hear faint laughter from inside, muffled through the walls but clear enough to remind me exactly what had just happened. They hadn't forgotten us. They had chosen to shut us out. And that simple act, that door closing, changed something inside me that could never be undone. Lila stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the closed door. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. She looked down at the pie in her hands and whispered, "It's okay. Maybe they don't like pumpkin." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt behind it. That kind of pain, quiet, confused, undeserved. It cuts deeper than anger ever could. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I tried again, then again, but she didn't answer. I sent her a text. "Mom, what are you doing? Please open the door." "Nothing." I tried Hannah next. The message showed delivered, but no reply. No one cared enough to even pretend. I waited another minute, hoping maybe my dad would come out. He was always the peacemaker, the one who used to tell me, family sticks together. But there was no sign of him, not even his shadow in the window. The laughter inside grew louder again, like they had decided the problem had been solved, as if we were never even there. I swallowed hard and turned to Lila. "Come on, honey," I said softly. "Let's go home." She nodded without a word and followed me to the car. The drive back felt endless. The roads were empty, and the only sound was the hum of the tires and Lila's soft breathing beside me. I kept glancing at her reflection in the window. She was staring out into the gray sky, the pie still resting on her lap. Every now and then, I'd see her thumb brushing the edge of the foil, as if she was trying to hold on to something good in a moment that had none. When we got home, I unlocked the door to our small kitchen. It was warm inside, but it didn't feel like Thanksgiving. I set the keys on the counter, and Lila quietly placed the pie in the center of the table. The smell of cinnamon and pumpkin filled the room. It should have been comforting, but it only made the silence heavier. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I didn't want her to see me fall apart. So I started busying myself, pretending to look for plates, pretending this was just another dinner. Lila sat down at the table, folding her hands neatly in front of her. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "Can I still say grace?" I turned around, and for a second I couldn't speak. Her faith in kindness, even after what had just happened, broke me in ways I can't explain. I sat beside her, held her hand, and nodded. She bowed her head and said softly, "Thank you for our home. Thank you for Dad. And thank you for the pie, even if no one wants it but us." When she finished, I couldn't hold it anymore. Tears slipped down my face silently. I reached over and hugged her. That night, in that small kitchen, I realized something important. Love doesn't need a table full of people to be real. It just needs two hearts that refuse to stop caring, even when the world turns cold. Ethan came home late that evening, still wearing his uniform, smelling faintly of smoke and exhaustion. The moment he stepped through the door, he knew something was wrong. Lila was sitting quietly on the couch, her eyes red and puffy. She looked up at him and tried to smile, but it only made her look more broken. He looked at me, his voice sharp. What happened? I didn't want to tell him right away. I didn't want to make it worse, but the truth came out anyway. My voice shook as I said, "They wouldn't let us in." Ethan froze. "What do you mean they wouldn't let you in?" "They opened the door," I said slowly, saw Lila, and said there wasn't room. For a moment, he just stared at me, like he couldn't process what I was saying. Then the anger hit him. He dropped his jacket on the floor, grabbed his phone, and started calling. The first number he dialed was my mom's. She picked up after a few rings, her voice calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. "Hello." Ethan didn't waste time. "You turned my daughter away?" he said, his voice low but firm. "On Thanksgiving?" There was a pause. Then she sighed, almost annoyed. "Ethan, it's not our job to entertain someone else's child. You should understand that." I could hear her voice clearly, even though I was standing across the room. Each word felt like a knife. Someone else's child. She didn't even say Lila's name. Ethan's face went red. "She's not someone else's anything. She's mine and your daughter's family. What kind of people do this to a kid?" My mom said something else, but Ethan didn't let her finish. He hung up, then called Hannah. She didn't answer. He tried my dad next, but it went straight to voicemail. Finally, he threw the phone down on the couch and just stood there, his hands trembling. Lila looked scared, not because of him, but because she didn't want him upset. She whispered, "It's okay, Dad. I'm not mad." He knelt down and hugged her tight. "You should be," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve that." When she went to bed, I sat on the couch next to him. The room was silent except for the faint sound of the heater. I felt empty. My mother's words wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. Someone else's child. I had spent my whole life believing my family was just overprotective or misunderstood. But now I saw it clearly. They weren't protective. They were cruel. Ethan finally spoke, his voice softer this time. "You can choose blood," he said, looking at me, "or you can choose love. But not both, not after this." I didn't answer right away, but deep down, I knew he was right. Something inside me had shifted. That night, I stopped hoping my family would ever see Lila as their own. And I started realizing that maybe I didn't need their approval. A week passed, and I tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned the house, went to work, helped Lila with her homework. Anything to stop thinking about that door closing in our faces. I thought my mom might call to apologize, but deep down I knew better. Then one morning, as I was packing Lila's lunch, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. For a moment, my heart raced, like it used to when I was little and wanted her approval. I hesitated, then answered. Her tone was casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, honey," she said. "Just checking to see what you're bringing for Christmas dinner this year." I froze. Not a word about Thanksgiving. Not a word about Lila. Just Christmas plans, like nothing had happened. I took a breath. "We're not coming, Mom." There was a pause. Then she laughed a little, that same nervous laugh she always used when she didn't get her way. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. It's Christmas. Family forgives." Her words hit me wrong. Forgives? As if I was the one who'd done something. As if my daughter hadn't been turned away like a stranger. "Family forgives," I said slowly, "but love doesn't forget when a child is humiliated." She went quiet. Then, in that cold tone I knew too well, she said, "You're overreacting. You've always been sensitive." That word, sensitive, used to make me shrink inside. But this time I didn't let it. I just said, "Maybe. But I'm still not coming," and hung up. After that call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet except for the sound of the clock ticking. Lila was drawing in the living room, humming softly. When Ethan came home, I told him what happened. He smiled faintly, not angry, just proud. "Good," he said. "It's about time we stopped letting them treat you like that." That night, we talked about how to move forward. I didn't want to spend another holiday waiting for people who didn't care enough to open their door. So we decided to have our own Thanksgiving redo. The next weekend, we cooked together, all three of us. Lila mashed potatoes with too much butter. Ethan grilled the turkey outside, and I made a pumpkin pie, the same one she'd carried to my parents' house. We invited a few neighbors who didn't have family nearby, an older couple from across the street, and a young nurse who worked with Ethan. The house was full of laughter, real laughter, not the forced kind that used to fill my parents' dining room. Lila said grace before we ate, her small hands folded, her voice steady. When she finished, Ethan looked at me and smiled. "Feels like the real thing now, doesn't it?" I nodded. It did. It wasn't loud or fancy, but it was peaceful, honest. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. I realized that sometimes walking away isn't revenge. It's freedom. That night, our little house felt warm in a way it hadn't before. The smell of turkey filled the air, the candles flickered on the table, and Lila was giggling with our neighbors as if she'd known them forever. Her cheeks were pink from laughter, and there was a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in weeks. When we finally sat down to eat, she proudly placed her pumpkin pie in the center of the table. "I made this all by myself," she said, smiling shyly. The older couple from across the street clapped, and the young nurse, Sarah, said, "Then I'm having 2 slices." Ethan reached across the table and gave Lila's hand a gentle squeeze. "You did good, kiddo." Lila beamed. For the first time, she looked like she truly believed she belonged. No awkward silence, no judgmental looks, just kindness. Real, easy kindness. As we passed the food around, stories started flowing. The neighbors talked about funny things their kids used to do. Sarah told us about a patient who made her laugh so hard she cried. Even I shared memories from when I was little, the good ones, before things got complicated. Lila listened closely, her fork resting in her hand. Then she said softly, "This feels more like family than any big dinner." Her words hit me deep. I looked at her, then at Ethan, and I realized she was right. Family wasn't about who shared your last name. It was about who opened their heart to you. After dinner, we cleared the table together. Lila helped wash the dishes while humming a tune she made up. Ethan poured coffee for everyone and brought out the pie again. Everyone insisted on seconds. Lila's face glowed with pride. When the neighbors left, they hugged us and said, "Thank you for including us. This was the best Thanksgiving we've had in years." After we closed the door, the house was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Lila curled up on the couch beside me. "Mom," she said gently, "can we do this every year?" My heart tightened at that word, Mom. She didn't say it often, but when she did, it felt like the world stood still. "Of course we can," I said, brushing her hair from her face. "This is our new tradition." Ethan joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us. "You know," he said, "maybe this was how it was meant to be. Just us. No drama. No pretending." He was right. I used to think family was something I had to earn, my parents' approval, my sister's acceptance. But sitting there with Ethan and Lila, I finally understood that love doesn't need to be earned. It just needs to be given freely and without conditions. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. The kind that comes when you stop chasing people who refuse to see your worth. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to protect the little circle of love we had built. And as I watched Lila drift off to sleep on the couch, her face soft and calm, I knew we had started something new, something real. That Thanksgiving didn't just feed us. It healed us. Months passed before I heard anything from my family. Then, one quiet afternoon, a letter came in the mail. The handwriting was instantly familiar, my mother's neat, careful script. My heart thudded in my chest as I held it, unsure if I wanted to open it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Lila had rolled out pie dough months before. The house was calm, the kind of peace that still felt new to me. I opened the letter slowly, half expecting anger or blame. But instead, it started with, "I didn't mean for things to go that way." She wrote that she missed me, that she didn't mean it like that, and that family says things they don't always mean. She said she hoped we'd come around by Christmas. She didn't mention Lila by name, not once. Just that day, as if writing her name would make her admit what she'd done. I read it twice. Every word felt empty. The same pattern I'd known all my life, excuses disguised as love. She didn't say sorry for the way she shut the door in that child's face. She didn't take responsibility. It was another way of saying, let's pretend it didn't happen. Ethan walked in while I was still holding the letter. "From your mom?" he asked softly. I nodded but didn't speak. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "You don't have to reply." "Not this time." I folded the paper slowly, pressing the crease with my fingers. Then I placed it in the drawer beside the stove, the one where we keep old receipts and loose change. I didn't tear it up. I didn't send anything back. I just left it there, forgotten, like something that no longer had power over me. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like a daughter turning her back on her family. I felt like someone finally choosing peace. That night, Lila and I made dinner together. She was humming again, brighter now, her laughter echoing through the house. When Ethan joined us, he looked around and said, "This place feels lighter lately." He was right. The house didn't feel weighed down anymore. It wasn't haunted by expectations or guilt. It was ours, messy, warm, and real. After dinner, I sat by the window and watched the lights outside flicker on one by one. My mom's house was only a few miles away, but it felt like another world. I realized that day that closure doesn't always come with apologies or explanations. Sometimes it comes in silence, when you stop waiting for people to be who you hoped they'd be. That Thanksgiving, the one that started with a slammed door, had changed everything. It hurt deeply, but it also stripped away illusion. It showed me that love isn't about shared bloodlines or family name. It's about who shows up when the world shuts you out. And sitting there, watching Lila laugh with Ethan in the kitchen, I knew exactly who my family was.